and welcome back to the Leah Moses Entrepreneur Podcast, the podcast that's all about business, self-employment, marketing, social media, growth strategies, you name it, everything under this umbrella of business and entrepreneurship. So today I just wanted to drop a, podcast about, are you hungry? Right? There's a difference between being hungry for something and being greedy. Of course, being greedy for something is, doing all you can, stepping all over people, to get to your goals. It's not about being greedy. But the concept of are you hungry, it comes from, when you think of lions that are in the jungle and they hunt, right? When you get hungry, you don't sit around and do nothing when you could do something about it. Right? When you are hungry, you get up and you go and you hunt, and even if it takes some hours, right, or in other aspects it may take some days, you get to what you have to do because you have that hunger and that desire. And so a lot of times, if you don't have a hunger, which is connected to your why, by the way, if you don't have that hunger, you will not move towards attaining your goals or achieving the maximum that you can in whatever industry or field or business that you are doing, right? And so it's really about asking yourself, are you hungry? But to get hungry, right, now usually with the natural body, after a few hours of eating or after you sleep, your body naturally requires food, right? And so if you tie that right back into life, after living day to day, you require things. Bills come whether you work or not. So there are always expenses that come your way that is supposed to stimulate a hunger within you to get these bills paid. Make sure the electricity stays on. Make sure that there's water. If you're international, make sure there's heat. Make sure there's air condition, depending on where you're really from, right? And so these things is what drives a person, right? These could be your whys. And then for a deep, strong why, it could be, again, your family. If you have children, these are people who are depending on you for survival, right? Especially if they are young children and if they are still school age, whatever, you have a responsibility to provide. And so, some people also, they may have older parents, and that may become their why and what fuels their hunger. And you really have to ask yourself, after you would have, write out your goals, right? A lot of us, we have goals. We have a general idea as to where we are heading, right? But a lot of the times, we don't develop that inner hunger. Even though the bills come, sometimes it's always taken passively, right? Or because whatever good connections we may have, bills are somehow always taken care of, so it's not something that drives you to put on that hustle hat, or something that drives you to go and read that book, go and drive you to listen to that audio tape, whatever it might take. But you really have to learn to build up that hunger within your system. Get hungry. And the minute you get hungry and decide to hustle and grind for what you need, you would be surprised to recognize how much you accomplish when you get that hustle and that hunger within you for success and for reaching your goals, right? When you give it some urgency, because it's easy for us to just sit down on goals. I did a former podcast on that, staying motivated. It's really easy to get demotivated and put off the things that we always wanted for another time, right? But really and truly, that action of procrastination kills all your dreams, right? We saw those quotes. Procrastination kills dreams. And so I would also want to add to that statement to say that hunger also kills dreams. Hunger leads to procrastination, which kills the dream, right? Lack of hunger, leads to that procrastination, because if you don't see the thing that you're attaining as something that you really need or something that you want in the short term, or you want it upon the date that you set, that's the next principle of goal setting. You must have a defined time that you want to get this done, because if you just put down that I would like XYZ, but you don't have a definite time, you are not going to be urgent about it. It's like, when it comes, or if it comes, it comes. And that's not the correct mindset. It's all about developing that hunger. Get hungry for it. How bad do you want it? Find something deeply rooted, be it family, children, whatever it may be. Find something from deep within, right? And get get to it. Understand that just as our physical bodies would get hungry for food because it's an important part of our, livelihood, we also need to start to get hungry about our goals, right? Do not starve your goals and be deceived by a paycheck, which a lot of people are being deceived by, right? As one quote said, the paycheck is the bribe they give you to forget your dreams, right? And so there's so much truth within that statement alone. But we need to get hungry. How bad do you want something? Or develop that mindset to understand that you need this thing now, because if you really start to think about it, crisis is right there. If an animal that hunts doesn't hunt, that's hunger, and then that's starvation, and then that's death. And so if you're one, you don't want to die, you don't want to not to wake up tomorrow and you can't pay a bill, or the collectors knocking or calling down your phone, knocking at your door, the bailiff is there to repossess some things. You need to really get hungry. Put yourself out there. Put yourself on in that position of what happens if you cannot fulfill your duties as a person, or you can't pay your bills, or you become you at such a low state whereby think that the only thing you can do is go on the road and try to stick out your hand. What happens then? You really need that hunger. Is the hunger within would actually propel you to do the things that you're supposed to do, to actually think. Sometimes you get your best ideas when you're that hungry, right? This as a hungry person, when you get from what I learned, when you get hungry, you're truly hungry, you have no other means of eating. That is where we have people who dig around in the dumps, because at that point I've heard people who gave their testimony of reaching that level in life already, and they said at that point you are not studying that it's a bin that you're in. You have to do what you have to do for survival. You wouldn't sit down there and starve to death willingly, right? Being free, a free person, you're not bound, right? So similarly with your goals, with your business, with your finances, you could definitely start to recognize that, hey, the more you are inactive, the more procrastination you're doing, you're actually starving your future. And if you have people who depend on you, you are actually starving them, right? From in advance, right? You are starving them, you are starving your generations to come when you do not take action, when you do not find urgency in the things that you need to be doing to have a comfortable life, a financially free life. And so that was the podcast today. I hope it inspired somebody. Be sure to subscribe if you're listening to on one of the other app platforms. Download, subscribe, and stay tuned every Monday for a new podcast from me. Thank you for listening.